What's going on, guys? Welcome to Extreme Daily Drivers. We are always balling on a budget and wrenching our garage. Once again, it's another Toaster Tuesday, and today we're going to be focusing on the front brakes. We're going to go ahead and replace the brake pads, the brake rotor, and the brake lines. So let me show you real quick what I got to get this job done. I will say some of these parts were kind of hard to find, so we'll go through each one of them. As always, there will be a link down in the description box if you guys want to do this yourself. For the most part, this is pretty cost-effective kind of brake upgrade, I would say. We got some decent rotors, we got some decent pads, and we got some good brake lines. So none of this stuff is like top of the line. None of this is going to absolutely change your box the way it stops or anything like that, but it's definitely an upgrade over what we're running right now. So let me just go through it real quick and what we got. So we got some agency power brake lines. You know, it was kind of hard for me to find brake lines. These are only for the front. I got these from fastscion.com. Once again, there's a link down in the description box if you guys want to pick a pair yourself. There are a lot of other companies that do make braided brake lines for XB. However, it was really hard to find this time of year for whatever reason. There's a lot of stuff in back order, so I was able to source these. I think they were about 70 bucks. Over here, Akebono brake pads. If you guys follow the Prelude build, you know I almost exclusively always use these brake pads. They're decent. They're not amazing, but they're better than stock, or at least as good as stock, and they barely dust, which is one of the reasons why I really love these. And also they come in at a really kind of inexpensive price point, right around 50 bucks. I got these off Amazon. Again, there's a link down below. And then moving on to the rotors. Now the rotors, I was kind of on the fence on what to get. I originally had some cross-drilled slotted rotors, but I decided to go with these. These are pretty cool. These are coated. The Rebestos, I think I'm saying that right. The Element 3, okay? They have this RPT, rust preventive technology, and they're really for places that kind of you're in the salt belt, you know, where you deal with a lot of snow. But after looking at my own rotors and seeing how rusted they are, I decided to go with something that actually comes coated. Now, this is coated inside and out. The fins you can see in there, they're coated, as well as the back. So I'm excited to go ahead and slap these guys on. And then moving on to painting our actual calipers, okay? So we got a series of different color paint here, as well as some decals. We're gonna try to paint the word Toyota on our caliper. Hopefully it's gonna look cool. But I got some paint that you can kind of find anywhere. But then I got this stuff here. This Pour 15 caliper paint. I used this on the Prelude. It was actually kind of the first little thing I did when the whole pandemic thing kicked off, and I love the way it turned out. It's just a silver, but we're gonna be using this today on the front of the XB. And since it's gonna be kind of a long install, I got myself a good Mountain Dew, which is half gone already, and I got myself some gloves because I don't feel like getting paint all over my hands. So you guys know what the first step is. It's gonna be to jack the car up and get the wheel off, so let's go ahead and get that done. All right, guys, so the first thing we're gonna do is remove the pads. You're gonna get yourself a 14mm box wrench like this, or you can use a socket. All right, so the two bolts that we're after here are gonna be this top bolt here on the caliper, as well as this bottom bolt. We're gonna go ahead and loosen the top, and we're gonna remove the bottom. All right, now what we're gonna do is grab the caliper and rotate it up and out of the way, and there are our pads. Just go ahead and grab them. If they're stuck in there, you can use a screwdriver and pull them out. You'll notice that they're a little bit different. The one in the front does not have any kind of bracket on it, where the one in the rear has this little metal bracket. So remember that when you're installing the new ones. So now that we got the brake pads removed, let's go ahead and loosen up the bolts that hold the brake line in. So I went ahead and reinstalled this bottom bolt, just made a hand tight, and then I hand tightened the top bolt of the actual caliper here, just because I need as much leverage as I can when removing or loosening this bolt back here, which is 14mm on the back of the caliper. All right, this guy broke loose actually pretty darn easy. You can see it's starting to leak a little bit. All right, so we got to move fast. I got it just hand tight right now, but now we want to focus on this end right here of the brake line, and you're going to want to use one of these brake line wrenches. So it's going to be a 10mm, and you see how it has that slot in there? That allows you to slide this over on top of the flare, or whatever you want to call that, and loosen it this way. You do not want to use this side of a box wrench in order to do this. You're only getting two sides of grip on that little banjo flare nut, and you want to get as much grip as possible. That's why you want to go with something like this. I'll put a link down in the description box if you want to pick one of these up, but yeah, you have to have one of these. All right, I was able to break this loose pretty darn easily, so we're good here. Now we can start disassembling the caliper and the rotor. Alright guys, now to remove the caliper, we got two 17mm bolts. We got one on top here, and then we got one right down here. I hope you can see it. Alright, once you get those bolts removed, you can grab the whole caliper and pull it away. And now we got our rotor, we can just pop this guy off. Alright guys, we're not finished yet, right? We still got to deal with this caliper and the brake line. So before we actually disconnect the line from the caliper, we're going to go ahead and take that cap off, and hopefully that'll actually alleviate a little bit of the pressure that is in the braking system, because once we disconnect that brake line, we're going to have brake fluid all over the place. So we have to make sure we have something to catch the fluid as we disconnect it. Alright, lid is off. Alright guys, I got something underneath the car to catch the brake fluid when we go ahead and disconnect this line. You got a couple of options. You can go ahead and disconnect it right here at the banjo on the caliper first, or you can go ahead and just disconnect it from the brake line. I think what we're going to do is we're going to disconnect it here first. We'll be able to control the kind of fluid dripping out a little bit easier with this line still attached. And then once it starts dripping for quite some time, I can go over here and tackle this end of it. You know, it's funny, anytime that you do a project like this, there's always a checklist involved of parts and stuff you might need in order to do the job. And I always think that I have everything. I always think to myself, oh yeah, I got that. Or, you know, yeah, I probably have it in the garage. Or a lot of times I just forget stuff. But luckily, as I disconnected this brake line, I watched the brake fluid drip all into the pan. I remembered that, oh my gosh, I need brake fluid. Do I have any? And sure enough, I got some here from AutoZone. You're going to need DOT3. It says so on the cap of the reservoir as well, in case you forget. But yeah, you're going to need some brake fluid, because as you can see, there's a lot dripping out. Okay, so this is going to add up over time here. I got the caliper off. It's sitting in there because that actually has some brake fluid in it. So I'm just letting this kind of drain into the bucket for now. We're going to go ahead and just continue to disconnect this brake line. I got a little 12 or 14mm bolt there, holding the line to the strut. And then we're going to go ahead and start to tackle this guy and remove him all the way. Now there is going to be like a little sandwich clip in here. It's kind of hard to see, but you're going to have to pull that out in order to remove the line itself. Alright guys, caliper's removed. I got it all cleaned up. I used a lot of brake cleaner and one of these little steel brushes to kind of really give it a good deep clean. Now, I know what you're thinking. Now that you got this thing all disassembled, let's go ahead and just paint it. Yeah, well, we can't really do that with this paint. So this is the only downside of this POR 15 stuff. So this stuff actually takes hours to dry. It's not something that takes 10 minutes in between coats and you just keep layering it on there. It actually takes about 2 to 3 hours to actually dry on the first coat, and then you got to put a second coat on there, which takes, again, about 2 to 3 hours. So I don't really have that time today. I got stuff I got to get done. I can't have the car just in pieces. I have to come up with a plan B. So we are going to actually paint these calipers on the car. So in order to do that, we have to install the brake line. So we're going to have to go ahead and completely remove the old brake line, which you now see is draining into an old milk jug. So the way this works is, again, you guys know that I already loosened this up here, right? So that guy's loose. And now we have to pry out this kind of little snap ring thing that holds the actual line in on this little bracket. The easiest way to do that is with kind of like a little crowbar or something to pry that thing away, and then we can remove the entire line. It's kind of hard to describe, so let me get a crowbar and show you what I mean. So like I said, this top nut is loose. I'm not going to remove it all the way though. I'm going to try to remove this little snap ring without removing that top piece. For some reason I think it's a little easier to do. I don't know, we're going to find out in a minute. But you got to sneak your little guy around here, and then of course I had a flashlight there that fell, but you got to pry this thing away. You can see here this tab's starting to move as I push on it with the crowbar. So now let me get on the other side and push it out, and then I will go ahead and remove it. Alright, after playing with it for about 5 minutes, I can pretty much grab it in my hand and pull this thing out. The way this guy works is it basically leverages itself against this bracket and the actual brake line to hold everything into place. Okay, that wasn't so bad. Brake line is off. And here is the old versus new. Pretty big difference. Now, you're probably saying, do I have to do this? Do I have to replace my brake lines? Absolutely not. If your brake lines are in good shape and mine were still in good shape, you do not have to do this step. However, I always like to upgrade stuff if I can, and obviously a stainless steel braided line is going to be much better than an old rubber hose. And so you know, for 70 bucks, it was worth it for me to do. I should have an increased brake feel. Pedals should be a little bit more firmer with these new lines. Installing new brake line is very similar to removal. One thing to keep in mind is that there's kind of like a little oval opening here, and then this piece kind of rotates. You want to match that little oval opening to the oval opening in the actual bracket. That bracket helps hold everything in place as you screw it all back together. Once you get your brake line and your hard line kind of on there tight, you're going to push up on the bottom of the brake line and then reinsert your clip. I'm going to have to do it with two hands, so let me do it off camera. Alright, I got this little clip in here. I hope you can see that. See how I got it started there? And it's underneath kind of the flare of the brake line, whatever you want to call that, the lip of the brake line. And now we're just going to go ahead and tap it in. I like to use a wooden handle of a little rubber mallet here, and just little by little. And then once you get it in like that, I take a screwdriver and I tap it in the rest of the way. All right, you can see I got it on there real good now. That guy's not going anywhere. And honestly, really, this is kind of the hardest part of the installation, is dealing with this little clip and dealing with that little bracket. When reinstalling the new brake line, you want to kind of follow the way the stock one was installed. Make sure that you're installing your ABS bracket. This guy up here, everything's nice and solid here. And then this will make its way down to the caliper that we're about to install. Alright, so now it's time to install the brake line to the caliper. Now the brake lines come with nice new hardware, and what you're going to want to do is put on one of these copper little gasket washers, slide this guy on, and then you're going to want to install the second copper washer and crank this thing down to the back of the caliper. Alright, hopefully that gives you a good idea of how it's supposed to look. I just have it finger tight, and now I'm going to go ahead and start painting this brake caliper. So I decided to actually paint half of the caliper on the car and half of the caliper off the car. This is really like a bunch of bad planning on my end, but you do have the option when you actually use a paintbrush to either just paint what you see while the brake caliper is on the car, or since we're actually changing the lines out, we got the brake caliper off the car, so I decided to do the bracket off of the car, okay? And the actual caliper is on the car. So you can see I still got the brake line installed and everything like that. So while this is drying, let me show you what comes with the Akabono brake pad kit for the front. So right here, open it up. And here are those new sliders I was telling you guys about. Okay, so you got two sets, a top and a bottom for both sides of the front. And you got your pads in here, all wrapped up nice. They have backing plates pre-installed in the back of the pads, which is great. You don't have to mess around with reusing old backing plates, which is something I used to do way back in the day. And then it does come with a little, you know, brake lube if you want to squirt this stuff on to prevent any kind of possible squeaking. Alright guys, it is the next day. I gave these calipers 24 hours to dry and it turned out pretty awesome. These things are just glowing in this dark wheel well, and they are going to look sick behind those black wheels. So, like I said in the opening, my goal was to take this decal, install it, and layer some paint over it so it actually says Toyota on the caliper. But after looking at the arch on the caliper and seeing that my little decal has no arch, I would have to cut each one of these letters out, place them on here, very specific order, and then paint and then peel the stickers away and all that. Well, guess what? I don't care enough about doing that, so this thing's gonna stay like it is, and we're gonna go ahead with the install and get this thing finally put back together. So I forgot to mention it in the open that these rotors are actually only $18 each. I got them off rockauto.com. Once again, if you're interested in getting a set for yourself, there is a link down below. All you gotta do is click away and place your order. But yeah, 18 bucks, man. You cannot beat this price. And I think this is just gonna look great for a long, long time behind these black wheels, because again, this coating here is actually supposed to stay looking like this for a very long time. So I'm excited to put them to the test and see how long they actually last. But for right now, I'm gonna go ahead and take the caliper off. You can see how loose it is here. I just have it hand tight. Take the caliper off and we're gonna slide the rotor right on. All right, rotor's in place. I use a couple of lug nuts to kind of keep the rotor where it's supposed to be as I went ahead and bolted on the caliper. Those two 17mm bolts, they need to be on there pretty tight because they're holding the caliper to the hub, so it's super important to make sure you whale those things on there. So before we install the pads, we're going to install these guys, these little sliders, guides, whatever the heck they're called. The thing that really holds these in place are these two little ears right here in the middle. Okay, so what you want to do is make sure those things are set. You can have one at the top and one at the bottom. I just kind of focus on getting these guys kind of snug, and then the rest of the thing will fall into place. All right, we got our sliders in place, one down below, one up top. Now we're going to go ahead and install the pads. Remember, the one without the clip is going to go in the front. So I like to put the bottom in and then just push in on top like so. We're going to grab this guy. It's got the clip. Clip goes towards the bottom, put in the bottom, and slide in the top. So I know you're probably thinking, that's it, clamp this thing down, bleed the lines, let's get on the road, but there's one more thing we got to do, and that is we got to press in this piston here. The pads that we removed are obviously a little bit smaller than what we just installed because these pads are brand new, so they're going to be a little bit thicker. So as a result, this needs to be pushed back in a tiny bit, and the easiest way to do it is with a good old C-clamp. You ought to have one of these laying around your house. If you don't, I feel bad for you. This thing is kind of like a universal tool. You use it for everything. But yeah, we go ahead and use this to push the piston back in. And when clamping down on that piston, don't back it in all the way till it actually bottoms out. You just want to back it in just enough so it slips over the pads. I'll show you what I mean in a minute. So you can see here, I got the C-clamp on here. We push this piston back, and hope you can see with my finger that it's just flush, and that's all you want. You just want to flush with the outside rim. Now we're going to take the C-clamp off, and this caliper should slide right over the new pads. All right, man, it's finally all back together. One last step. Now you're going to have to grab yourself an 8mm box wrench, because we're going to have to go underneath the car and bleed the brakes at the piston. You're going to need a helper, so somebody's going to have to jump in the car and pump that pedal while you open and close the valve and let the fluid drain out. All right, guys, you got my little helper here in the car, and what we're going to do is we are going to pump the brakes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and on 5 you're going to hold it. Okay?
We've done this before, I'm aware.
Okay, so one last thing I want to remind you guys of. When doing this, make sure that you fill up your reservoir to the max line, okay? Now keep this at this line. You don't want too much fluid to drain out of the system and dry out your master cylinder here. So make sure you add fluid to that. I'm gonna go underneath the car and loosen up that bolt. All right, guys, making good progress. Just did the passenger side. I probably should have told you earlier, you need to start with the passenger side. There's an actual kind of setup for when you go ahead and bleed your brakes. And since we're only messing with the fronts, you want to start with the passenger side first, then work your way with the driver's side. I got my kind of like urine sample here. This is a little Blake breeder kit that I actually got at an auto parts store. I'll put a link down below if you want to pick one of these guys up. I hate these things. This is like the 3rd, 4th, 5th one of these I've bought over the years. However, I will say that this cheap piece of junk is actually working really, really good. So I'll put the part number down below. We got one more side to do, the driver's side, and then we'll be good to go. So I'll actually film the driver's side as Kelly jumps in and starts pumping that pedal again. All right, same as before.
Ready?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay.
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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Anyway guys, the brakes are doing great, still braking in. Obviously you can start to see where it's starting to wear away on the rotor. I tried to park in the sun here, so I'm kind of in a weird spot in the street, but anyway, you can see where it's starting to wear away on the rotor. But I think this is going to be a really cool look going forward, and I'm really happy the way this turned out. So anyway guys, that's the video for today. Make sure you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think of the rotors, the calipers, and the pads. Looking forward to next week. If you follow me on Instagram, you know we got big things coming. So have a great day. I'll see you next week. Another Toaster Tuesday in the books. Thanks so much for watching. Later.